Hey folks, we have Bruce with us here today from Bruce's Bees. I've been following Bruce on YouTube forever. He's a legend. You know him and you love him, and I'm so grateful, Bruce, for you joining us today on the channel.
Well, thanks for having me, Jed. I appreciate it, the opportunity, and it's going to be fun.
Well, let's just start with how you got into beekeeping. Can you share a little bit about yourself and how you first got into it?
I grew up. I was always kind of obsessed with insects, and I was kind of a weird kid that way. I grew up on a farm, I live here in Southeast Alabama. I live close to where I grew up, and I grew up on a horse farm. Actually, we had all kinds of animals, and it was just a awesome place to live. It was just an incredible place to grow up, and learned how to work hard there. Learned how to learned a lot of respect for life and with all the animals we had and just my dad was a great man and my mom was a great woman and just a really awesome childhood. But the whole time I kind of like when I was, I think in the first grade, I had an insect collection. We had an entomologist in our church here, that obviously entomology deals with insects. And so he kind of told me or taught me how to euthanize the insects and then how to pin them on a board and kind of display them. And I thought that was kind of cool. And I did that. And I had a really nice insect collection at a very young age. And I think I used that for a project later in my schooling a few years later. That's how I remember it. I'm not sure if I was quite that young or what, but I just remember that I was always intrigued by insects and what they can do. Just the miracle of nature has always been something that I've just really enjoyed being a part of. And so, fast forward many years back in 2012, my dad, I played a lot of sports and I was involved obviously with raising a family, got married, had a family and just was really involved with that. And didn't think a lot about, um, spent a lot of time on the farm, but didn't really think of doing anything like beekeeping for a long time. I was more into sports for all those years, but 2012, I'm a physical therapist. I was doing home health and I was at a patient's home and an older fellow that has since passed on, but he had honeybees. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I was just became intrigued with them. And I had seen, beehives at other patients' homes before, never thought much about it. But for some reason, I started asking him about them. And he was just really in awe of the bees, kind of like I am now. He just had a lot of respect for them, just loved them, and he started telling me some things about the bees and just for some reason, I got interested in it, and it was fascinating to me. And so then, somewhere around that same time, our church had a conference, a general conference, and one of the leaders at the conference talked about honeybees, and I guess he had had a family member or somebody, maybe his dad, I can't remember, who had bees, and gave some bee facts and talked about how what an incredible thing it was, the beehive all working together, how each bee was only responsible for uh very small things. Each bee only has like a 12th, is responsible for like 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Yet the hive is an incredible thing when they all work together. And he kind of compared that to the members of the church and how we each have a role to play, but we can do a marvelous and a great work if we all work together. So those two things kind of got me interested in it. Well, my dad at the time was suffering from cancer and he passed away in January of 2013 and just a couple months later. And I kind of started thinking about, I think when I heard the talk and talked to that patient, I kind of wanted to give beekeeping a try. But when my dad passed away, I asked mom if I could put some hives up on the farm and she thought about it and told me I could. So it was April 2013. And it was a Monday or Tuesday. There were a couple people in our church here that had bees that I knew from church, and one of them was pretty heavy into it. And so I asked them, they're brothers actually, and one of them finally told me that there was a local guy here that could hook me up. Now I had gone online like on a Monday or Tuesday and just started doing some research. I didn't know what a frame was. I didn't know what it meant if a hive was an 8 frame or a 10 frame or a 7. I had no idea what it looked like on the inside of a beehive. I couldn't remember. Believe it or not, I was on a mission for my church and I had gone through some bees with a guy, but I did not remember that at all. I have a picture of it in my photo album, but I don't remember that actually doing that. So it's kind of bizarre that I don't remember that at all. But so I actually got online and I was ready to drive over to somewhere in the deep parts of Georgia to pick up a, I was convinced from reading a website that a 7 frame hive was the best thing. Had no idea what that meant. And I was going to drive over there, buy, I think, a couple of packages and a couple of beehives and at least one or two, and then just drive back and give it a try. But I talked to my buddy at church, the guy that I knew from church, and he told me of a local guy here. His name is David Eldridge, who had bees, and he sold bees and he would provide all the equipment. So that Saturday morning, 3 or 4 days later, I drove over to Ashford, Alabama out here, and one of the guys that had bees here in our church, he took me out and I went through his hives with him. And he showed me that no, the big fat bee was not a queen; it was a drone. And I got my first experience with it. He let me borrow one of his bee jackets. I drove a few miles from his place and picked up my first two hives from David Eldridge. He actually built his own boxes. He had the wood milled, and then he constructed his own boxes, and he had put two nukes of bees into two 10 frame boxes. I was so proud. I stuck them in the back of my son's Ford Ranger truck, little Ford Ranger, drove to the farm, set them on the cinder block hive stands there, and I was hooked. I was hooked immediately. A few weeks later, I bought two more. My brother bought two. I'm not sure why he bought them, but he did. And I guess he just wanted to do what I did. One of them went up at the farm, and then one of them came into my backyard here. So I had started off with 4 colonies that first year. And that's how I got started. And I wore David Eldridge out. He became my mentor, and he was really good to help me. He provided all the equipment I needed. He provided all the queens I needed when I thought I had lost my queen, when I probably hadn't. He counseled me as far as how to take care of the bees, how to take care of the, mites and beetles, which I didn't do a very good job of because I kind of didn't listen to him, and I paid the price for that. But he was a great mentor. He was patient with me and helped me, and kind of gave me that kickstart that I needed. So that's kind of how I got started, and I became completely obsessed with it, really pretty much from day one. I'm just absolutely obsessed with these bees.
So how many hives do you have now? I'm just thinking 2013, was it? That
Yeah,
doesn't 2012, 2013, that doesn't sound like very long ago to me. So
yeah.
from 2 hives to where you are today, how many hives do you have?
Um, beekeeping numbers, they change over time. What I had yesterday may not be what I have today, but I have over 100 colonies. I just did splits yesterday, Friday. I did quite a few splits. And so I began that day with probably just over 100 colonies. I'm not sure exactly how many, probably 105, maybe 110. And then I had 28 queens, some of which were used to replace the queens that were in the hives, and some of them were used for splits. A majority of those probably made 24, 25 splits. And so we'll see how they do. I don't know how they're going to do, but we made some splits. So I guess if you include all those colonies, I'm probably up to about 125 now, maybe 130. But that could change. That could change. Some of them may not be accepted. I may not. They may not all make it. So I'm gonna say I try to stay between 100 and 150 is kind of what my range is. And every year I kind of go up and down some. Last year at peak time, right before our honey harvest, I had a total of 144 colonies, 100 of which were production colonies, and I lost down to where I am now, whatever that is. So that's kind of a a very vague description of how many colonies I have.
Well, one of the reasons that I ask is because that progression is significant, and there's a lot of learning that goes along with it. The story with Dave, I think Dave Eldridge resonates with me. Getting started in beekeeping was hard because every time I'd open that beehive, it was something new. And I had my mentor, Steve Brooks, that I was sending text messages to and calling probably on a weekend when I got into the hives, probably a dozen, half a dozen times. And I would ask, like, is this okay? Am I bugging you? But he was always super gracious. Sounds like that's the type of relationship you had with Dave. Um, have you that component seems critical to starting in beekeeping. Have you been able to do that for others, or how have you been able to do that for others as you've gotten into the more serious into beekeeping?
Well, first of all, I'll kind of talk about my mentorship. It kind of has changed over the years. David was always really good for several years, and then I've kind of gotten more mentors now as the YouTube thing has grown, and even as I've gotten larger and David has kind of faded a little bit. He doesn't I don't even know if he has bees anymore. He had some health issues. A couple local guys here that are, one is a large sideliner, and the other is a commercial guy. And just obviously my friends on YouTube. So I've always still have people I bounce stuff off of. You know, we kind of help each other out. But as far as actually mentoring people, haven't really, I don't really sell bees much or equipment. So I haven't really had a lot of people that, have bought bees from me or anything like that. But I do have a few people I try to help when I can. There's a program called Hives for Heroes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, where we, you can sign up as either a mentor or a mentee, and it's designed for military veterans, I guess active duty probably too, military veterans and first responders, and uh, and first responder veterans are those who've retired for first responding. And it's they found that bees really do a great job of therapy, so to speak, for people who are under PTSD and things like that. And so they really, for some reason, the bees really help. And so I am a mentor for that. I have a mentee, but I haven't done a great job of just mentoring people. Usually I'll have people come and hang out with me and try and learn from my bees. If people want to get into bees, I say, look, you buy the jacket and come hang out with me for a few days and just make sure it's something you want to do. And then we'll see about maybe helping you get some bees. And it's not that I'm not willing to help. I just don't have a ton of time I mean, I'm willing to answer questions, but as far as going out and just being a mentor and just being there, it's just hard for me to get away with my schedule. I work full time as well, to just get out and spend a lot of time. But I really try to help people out as much as I can. I hope the videos help. And then I am more than willing to try and answer questions if I can, as much as I'm able to.
Well, I got to tell you, Bruce, you have been a mentor to me and you didn't even know it. I have literally watched hundreds of hours. This is embarrassing to say. I have literally watched hundreds of hours of your videos and probably some others that are watching this right now. So you've been a huge help to me. And Bruce, for all those listening, probably doesn't even know this, but I put comments on his videos and he always responds and like doesn't even know who I am across the country. So it's pretty cool. Um, let's rewind. Let's stay with when you first started in beekeeping. So if you could go back in time to the first year or the first couple of years, what's one or two things that you do differently?
Well, there's a lot of things I do differently, but probably the most important thing, and David told me this from day one. He said, you need to control the mites and beetles. And I would try to do a better job of that. I would try and do a better job. I didn't have any clue what mites were. Of course, you see the hive beetles, didn't really know how to manage those. And he would give me, like, if I would go to him, he would say, well, why don't you take this and treat mites? And so he'd give me something to go put in he would give me this stuff. But I didn't really understand anything about how to do that, anything about how to assess for mites. I'm not sure if people did a lot of that back then. I don't have any idea, but he would just treat everything, and he would kind of tell me what to do. And then the other thing that I would say besides the mites and beetles is just I would be one thing that he told me very early. I can't remember if it was the first or second year, but I started thinking I'd lost my queen. I would go in the hive, I couldn't find her. And he would tell me, do you see eggs? And I'm like, no, I don't. Well, then he had to show me what it's like to see eggs. And so then when I saw him, I began to recognize that, I could see when the queen was in there, but I would be convinced that I'd lost my queen. And he would say, now, Bruce, he would tell me, if you don't find your queen or evidence of a queen, I think he said, give it 2 weeks and then go in and look. And if you still don't have one, then you might have a problem. But I wouldn't listen to him. I'm like, oh no, I don't have a queen. So he would sell me queens, and I bought, I don't know how many queens from him that first and or second year. And finally I learned that became expensive. I started listening to him. And I remember pretty vividly, I think even the hive that it was, the colony I went into, where I went in, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of later in the day. And it was, I may have shined my phone down or something to be able to see, and I saw the what I call milk brood in the bottom of the cells. It was like a milky looking substance. So I asked him, I said, I think I messaged him or called him and said, what is that? He said, that means you got a queen. And that was one that I actually waited on, and they made their own queen. And so then I realized that was some really wise counsel that I had. And that's what I do now. If I don't see a queen or evidence of her in there, and it's during bee season, I'll just give them a couple of weeks, and probably 80, 90% of the time they've made their own queen. They've superseded their queen or they've swarmed, and they usually end up with a queen in there. So those are probably two things I would do. Number one, be sure and especially at first, treat for mites and beetles. Just go through and just take care of your bees that way. And now I would say assess and treat as needed type of a thing. And then I would say maybe listen to my mentor and don't just bull through and do my thing and think I've got it figured out. And because that actually cost me a fair amount of money when I was just trying to get started on buying all those queens. And a lot of stress too
Well,
that was unnecessary.
I would say that it's no wonder that Dave spent so much time mentoring you. You were his best customer. uh,
Yeah, I bought all kinds of stuff from him. But he didn't like he would give me stuff too. He didn't really care. He did it for the money, yes, but he wasn't the type of guy that was he wasn't in it just to make money. He's just a good guy, just a really good guy. He really wants to help people out and now don't get me wrong, he does want to make money, but if he really sees someone that's committed, he was more than willing to help and just a really good you just could picture kind of a southern good old boy redneck guy. He didn't want to be on camera. He didn't care. He didn't want people even knowing what he was doing necessarily, but he just was good as gold and would help whenever it was needed. He would drive out to he drove several miles. He helped move my bees when I needed to move sometimes with his equipment before I had any ability to do that. And he just was just a great mentor and a great help for me, really up until just the last few years. He was just a great help.
Man, it sounds just like my mentor, Steve. Same type of thing. Would drive hours to come and help me with the situation.
Yep.
Even on his way down, I would think, man, what is he doing? Like this is a big investment for him, but super grateful. Did you ever think about quitting?
I don't know if I've ever thought about quitting. I may have thought about it before, but every year I get pretty burnt out in the late summertime because it's just so much for me to try and do. And I probably do 90 to 95% or more of the work myself. I do try to get people involved. I've got a couple of young folks around here that can kind of help, like the kid that helped me out a couple of days ago. If I really get in something, and if I have a really busy day or a busy weekend where I got a lot of work to do, like harvesting honey, there's no way I could do it myself. So try to get a crew up for that. But so by the time, September, October, even into November rolls around, I am usually pretty burnt out and just, man, I need to scale back or how am I going to keep doing this? And usually the first thing that enters my mind is the YouTube thing. Do I need to just stop YouTube and just focus on the bees? Do I need to just not really, because that is something that could go away and I could still keep the bees. But then by the time, and even with the bees, I'm like, do I need to scale back? Do I need to try to have less colonies? Cause that would be more fun. I'm so busy and I'm not very efficient and I get so tired. But I've never really seriously considered quitting, and thought that's it. I'm done. I've never done that. I just enjoy it too much. And now I feel a responsibility to the customers I have. I have a fairly large customer base for my honey and also the people on YouTube. That's one reason I feel that responsibility. And it's not, if I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't do it, but I do. I want to do it. I enjoy it. And every year, probably around, December, moving into January, that feeling comes back. I start getting excited again, and now I'm all in again, and it's just so much fun. I am tired, not that I don't get tired, but it's just the motivation is there to continue on and to just try to do a better job. It's always a challenge. Every beekeeping year is a challenge, and I look forward to it. And so that's it's a new opportunity. Every year's a new opportunity, and if you have a bad year, maybe the next year hopefully will be better. A really good gear, you want to try and match that or beat it the next year. And so it's kind of a continuous competition with yourself and just an opportunity to develop your skills and to just move to heights that you may not have ever considered when you first started.
What's the most important thing a beginner should focus on when getting started?
I would say the fundamentals. I would definitely get a mentor. And the thing is, if you don't know anything about bees and you don't know anything about beekeepers, it's hard to know who your mentor is or if they're going to be good, but you need it. You got to find a mentor. And I would look for one that actually has bees that they keep alive and one that practices some really sound beekeeping principles. There are people that have all kinds of different ways of keeping bees, and that's okay. But someone that you can walk out and say, okay, this person has, they keep bees alive. I would want to know, make sure they're successful at what they do, because if they kill their bees every year, that's going to be tough. But most people that are willing to mentor are pretty good. I think most people, if they're willing to do that, you're trying to help somebody out. And so I think that's the number one thing I would suggest. Number two, I'd recommend getting at least 2 colonies. 2 to 4 colonies would be a good number, because if you just get one, if you don't know, if you don't know anything about bees, really, you don't know what they should look like, and you have, and they might be kind of weak and you wouldn't know it. They might be super strong. You would never know what the norm is. But if you have 2 colonies, it's a good idea to have that for variety, for various reasons. Number one, you can compare them. You can see, you can watch, you get more experience in going to 2 hives. You can see there's probably going to be a little bit of a difference in them. You can kind of tell, attitude, their different activity, how they build the comb, how much honey they make, how strong they look. You can just compare. And another number two reason would be, if you lose one of them, you still have some bees, but if you have one colony, you lose it, you have 100% loss. And so that makes it difficult. If you can have 3 or 4, that's even better. But at least 2, I would say, to start. And number three, I would say, just, if you have failure, and you will, don't give up, don't quit, keep pressing forward. If it's something you want to do, some people buy all the equipment, they get everything they need to get started, they get started, and then they just don't enjoy it. And if that's the case, then by all means, you shouldn't make yourself do it, feel responsibility to do that if you don't enjoy it. But if you really want to succeed, you can. But you just have to start. Sometimes you have to start over and just keep plugging away, keep growing. If you have failure, don't take it personal, because I'm sure, Jed, you've heard about the major loss in commercial beekeeping this year, and I don't know how it has affected the hobbyists, but even the pros are having struggles and losing bees. And so it's not you necessarily, it's just it just happens. You're going to lose some colonies. So I would say, I think the word that Bob Benny uses is be tenacious. Don't quit. Keep moving forward, learning and getting better every day. And that beekeeping is a way you can do that. Those are principles of life that apply to beekeeping for sure.
I remember my first year beekeeping. I don't remember what I was doing. I've just got I'm a backyard beekeeper. I'm a hobbyist. And I was doing something with one of the hives, and it was a mess. I had boxes everywhere, they were flying in the air, bees everywhere. And I came inside and I was super frustrated. And I told my wife, I said, I think I just destroyed that hive. I think it's over. I think I just destroyed that hive. Speaking to your failure part. Now, the bees were fine. Like, they know, one thing that I've learned is they know what they're doing way better than I give them credit for. At least I gave them credit for. Bruce, are you still learning? Like,
Oh yeah.
it's been close to 15 years, or do you go out there and you don't often find things that are new?
I mean, every single time. There are very few times you go in the bee yard and everything goes exactly like you think it will. I see things. There were these, just when Greg was here. I don't know if I caught it on video. I'm not sure if I'm going to show it or not. I probably won't, but we opened up the colonies, and I had some Hive Alive fondant patties in there, and they'd consumed them, so we were pulling them out. There were these little tiny bugs on it. It looked like, almost like little gnats. They were tiny, and they were running around on the patty covers, and I was like, what the heck is that? Greg is like that too. And we were hoping it wasn't that new mite that's coming in the area. They were just so tiny, but they weren't. Anyway, I'm like, I'd never seen that before. It was just very bizarre. And so I think they have wings. I'm not mistaken. It was hard to tell what they were, but that's just an example. And then Greg was down here. He'd never experienced fire ants before. And he got to experience fire ants here in Southeast Alabama, and realized that, I learned this just within the past year or two. I used to try to kill the fire ants in my bee yards, but I found out there's a symbiotic relationship. They actually get along quite nicely. And the fire ants will actually help the bees, as far as
Mm.
they actually are mortal enemies to the sugar ants, which will destroy a colony. Fire ants can build their ant hill all the way up the side of a hive, and they never mess with the bees. So that's just a little. You think the fire ants are so aggressive and mean, but they just work perfectly with bees. And so, but yeah, every single time I go in the bee yard, probably, it's just always, that's part of the thing that keeps bringing you back, is just the not knowing what to expect. You may have monster colonies that you think are going to do really well that begin to crash, or they don't ever produce like you think they will. And you may have really anemic looking colonies that just blow up and become monster honey producers. So you just really never know what to expect. And I see things all the time. I'm always learning, and it's always shifting. Like the goalpost always shifts in beekeeping because there are so many variables that happen, and every year is different. Every day is different. Even bee yards that might be 2 or 3 miles apart can be totally different in what they're doing. And so it's just a puzzle that we're all trying to figure out, and it keeps coming back.
One of the fun things about that exact topic is I've talked to beekeepers, or as I talk to beekeepers about challenges that I have, it's funny that often I'll see that beekeepers' opinions on how to handle a challenge is different, like very different, because we're all just trying to solve this puzzle. And I don't know that very rarely is there an exact right way or an exact wrong way. There's just different ways, and we're all just trying to figure out which is part of the fun.
Well, they
Uh,
say if you ask a beekeeper 5 different questions, you'll get 10 different answers. And I mean, there's different variations of that, but that's kind of what I like to say. And it's true, if you everybody's got their own opinion of what works best for them. So what I tell folks is, if it's good to get advice, to get um well, advice from other people, but you've got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. You need to try the different things you learn, and if it sounds good to you, if it sounds like it'll work, then try it. And by doing that, you'll develop your own strategy. No two beekeepers keep bees exactly the same way. I don't think, however many hundreds of thousands of beekeepers there are out there, I doubt there's two that do the exact same way. And so but that's the thing, is there's so many ways to do it. And but everybody's got to figure out what works best for them and help, and they're going to have to establish their own goals and then go for it.
that's got to be encouraging for a new beekeeper. Like there's some trial and error. They're going to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. You shouldn't try to be perfect. What's one piece of gear you think beginners often overlook but really need?
I think there are some new beekeepers probably that don't buy the protective gear they need. They may, and I did this when I first bought my protective gear. I bought a veil, and that was it. I had all my hive tool and stuff, but I bought a veil that just went over the head, and you tied it under your arms, and
Hmm.
you know, and it just I ended up getting a jacket very quickly because it just wasn't enough, and it wasn't very comfortable. It just didn't work very well. And another thing is, I think some beekeepers probably overdo it on the protective gear. They might get a great big huge suit when they may just need a jacket, but I would rather be over prepared than under prepared. And I think that's important and critical, because that's going to be part of the experience. As a new beekeeper, you're not going to know how to act around the bees, and they're going to make you nervous. And if you don't have sufficient beekeeping gear and you get stung and you get, it can become a miserable experience for you if you're not used to it, if you just don't like it. And so I would say initially, and this might be your next question, I'm not sure, but I would say make sure you have the protective gear you need. Um, and just talk to your mentor about that, and get what you need. That's the first thing I tell people if they want to come and learn about bees from me, is buy your jacket, because that's a fairly reasonable expense that you can have. And then I'll take care of everything else. Just come hang with me for a few times in the bee yard and see if you like it. And that way they can know, without having to spend all the money on the gear and the bees and the hive tool and the smoker and everything else. They can kind of know if they like it or not.
I'll tell you about my bonehead move as it pertains to equipment. For some reason, when I first got into beekeeping, the smoker seemed like so much work. Like lighting a
Yeah.
smoker and starting it's obviously not a lot of work, but it looked like a lot to me. And so I had read somewhere that you could just spray them with sugar water, to spray them, and that'd do the job. I learned fast that did not do the job. Like that was my big mistake. Maybe it worked for some people, didn't work for me.
Yeah. This is what I think people get in trouble with, and I think it's good that people do this, but it can also be a negative, is that they do go on YouTube and they do go online, and they watch people all over the world working bees, and everybody, like we said earlier, has their own opinion. And so I've seen people that just use water. They spray it on the bees instead of smoke. I've seen people use the sugar water. There's so many different techniques out there, but I think a good, solid bit of advice would be just kind of stay with the mainstream. Do what, initially what successful beekeepers do. If you've got one person out there doing a certain technique and it works for them, that's fine. But just because that kind of speaks to you, and you think, oh my gosh, I want to save the environment by not ever using any treatments on my bees. Well, I mean, I understand that. And some people that do that have worked a long time to develop their genetics to a point to where they are able to do that successfully. But brand new beekeepers need to just learn how to enjoy the experience, how to work with the bees and how to, keep them alive. And so go ahead and use some of the traditional things. And as you learn more about the bees, then you can begin to delve into some of these things about, trying to improve your genetics and raise queens and do all the different things that can put you maybe in that camp if you want to be in that camp. But I would say kind of stay with the mainstream, find out what works. A lot of the beekeeping books have a lot of good basics and good advice, even though some of them you find out are myths, not necessary. But most of the advice in the beekeeping books aren't going to hurt anything. But once again, there's where the mentor comes in, the mentor that keeps its bees alive. That's very important.
As a new beekeeper, the hive inspections can be pretty intimidating. What advice would you give to somebody that's going in to inspect a hive, what to watch for, what to worry about, what not to worry about, etc.?
That's a really good question. And once again, if you have a mentor with you, that's great. Or if you can go hang out with somebody who has bees and kind of get the feel for that. But I would say just go slow and take your time. Um, just you got to learn how to handle a hive tool, how to handle a smoker, how to crack the lid, how to take the hive apart, basically how to go in there. And I would also say, don't be afraid to go in the colony. Don't be afraid to inspect them every 10 days to 2 weeks during bee season. They probably don't need that much. They may not need that much. You can, I'm to the point now to where many times I can just crack the lid and look at the top of the frames and see, hey, this colony looks good and just move on. But, I've been through thousands of colonies probably in my time in the last few years. So you kind of get an idea or a sense of what to expect. And you don't have to go through every frame and look at all the bees. I would try to become skilled at, first of all, managing the bees, using the smoker, how much to use. You just learn all those things with experience. And then I would try to also learn how to identify the different types of bees, look at the worker bees, learn what the drones look like, learn what the worker bees look like, learn what the queen orange looks like, and try to become skilled in finding the queen. If you can have a marked queen, I think that's a great idea because they're easier to see. And just take your time, enjoy it. Don't try to ramp up to 100 colonies in 2 or 3 years or immediately. Just start off with just a couple, 2 to 4 colonies, and learn the bees. And the greatest advice I could give is not really what I did, but just learn how to keep a good solid 2 to 4 colonies alive. If you need to split up to 6 or 8 to do that, that's fine. But just learn how to manage those bees effectively and efficiently, and take your time and don't get in a big hurry to grow super fast. And if you do that and your skills develop, then you can begin to progress. And every step of the way, do the same thing. Learn to manage 15 hives the same way, and then you can bump up as time goes on. But just take your time, enjoy the bees, learn to kind of sense what's going on with them, and you can do that if you spend time in them. But if you just get you a beehive, set it up in the backyard, put bees in it, and just set them out there, and then just try to go harvest honey, you're not going to be successful because you're not going to know anything about the bees. You're not going to learn about the bees, and there's really no reason to do that. You need to take care of your bees and get to know your bees and get to learn how to manage and just develop those skills. And you can develop a relationship with nature, honestly, with the bees and with nature, that can take you to just incredible places if you'll allow it to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about the beekeeping community. Tell us about the beekeeping community and how they've helped you on this journey, and maybe even add some for the new beekeepers out there, or maybe not, like anybody who they should be following on YouTube from your perspective, besides Bruce's Bees.
I would say Jed's hobbies. Follow him for sure.
That's right.
I can't say enough about the beekeeping community. There are just so many layers of this, Jed. I could talk all night on this topic, but just so many incredible people. I think that beekeepers are, as a general rule, the salt of the earth. Many beekeepers come from humble backgrounds, a lot of farming type, a lot of, you know, just hillbilly types, a lot of country boys. There are a lot of people that live in large cities that have bees on the rooftops. And so you have every, I think every type of person, every economic status type person. You've got very wealthy people that keep bees, and you've got very humble people that have next to nothing that keep bees. But I think a common thread is just the awesomeness of these people. I don't know why beekeepers are so cool, but they just are. And I just love it. That's my favorite part. My buddy Greg Burns at Nature's Image Farm has a term that he coined, I think, but we've adopted it and I've stolen it. The bees are the conduit to the people. And really, that's the purpose. That's what you can, we love the bees, but it allows us to gain relationships with other people as well. That community, I think, is that's what I love most about the whole thing. Honestly, the community that's been developed. So, as far as we do a stream team every Wednesday night. We rotate between my channel at Bruce's Bees, Greg's channel at Nature's Image Farm, and then Brian Coper's channel at Castle Hives. And we started doing that a little over 3 years ago, and it's grown into quite the community. People, we recognize each other, of course, and then there's always in the comment thread. I think we had the other night we had I think around 300 plus on one of the ones we did on my channel. So much fun. And just people just in the chat, chatting, getting to know each other. You feel like, Jed, like you get to know these people, like they're your friends, even though you may have never met them. You're talking back and forth with them, and go to the bee clubs, and you can meet people there, and you can go to YouTube, and like you said, Jed, earlier, I think it feels like you know people already. You were telling me that earlier, so it's almost like you feel like they're your friend. And so, but the community is just incredible. I think most beekeepers are in tune with what's going on in the environment. They care about, first of all, you have to care about nature just a little bit, and living things. If you're going to have, in a average colony, 40 to 60,000, these little insects that are living, and you're trying to keep them alive, you learn to care about them. And I think that translates. There's something divine about that. When you look in a colony of honeybees, there's just no way that just happened. So most people that keep bees, I think, have a similar thread. Most people believe that there is a divine creator, that there's a God out there that's created these little insects and these little critters. And so there's another aspect, almost a spiritual aspect to it, that there's so many lessons to be learned, not just beekeeping and making honey, but just so many just analogies and concepts and principles that can be learned for life as you work with the bees, as you meet other beekeepers, and as you communicate. And as Greg Burns calls it, you break bread with these people, and you just get to know them. And sometimes that's figurative. Brian and Greg and I talk about how you and I here, Jeb, we're talking. And so we've established this relationship. We're getting to know each other a little bit, and it happens over and over and over again in the comments in the YouTube videos. It happens at the conferences. It's just really cool. And so that, I think the community has become my favorite part of beekeeping. At first, it was just the bees and learning about the bees and kind of my local bee club and getting to know a few people. I really didn't have any intention on doing anything like this, a YouTube thing. But over the years, I think this community has become a huge part of who I am. And it's had a tremendous impact on me. And I've met some of the most influential beekeepers out there, either literally or through chats and through interviews. But I've also met a lot of people that are just trying, just small time, just have a couple of hives in the backyard, just doing the best they can. And I just love everybody. It's awesome. As far as people I'd recommend watching, that is a slippery slope because there are so many different everybody's got their own opinion, and there is a little bit of rivalry between some of the channels out there. But I would say Bob Benny is very solid in what he's doing. Of course, Greg Burns, Brian Coper, friends of mine. Greg is a commercial guy. I'm a sideliner, and Brian is a hobbyist. And so Brian is doing things for smaller beekeepers that you would be doing. Brian lives in Ohio, and so it's very cold up there. So they are dealing with an incredibly cold year up there. Greg also lives in Ohio. I'm here in the South. A lot of my favorite YouTube people are Mike Berry over in Louisiana, Bracken Barker there in Utah, Glade Sessions, Utah Bee Man there in Utah, the California Beekeeper, Jose. Oh my gosh, Keith Spillman. I could just go through so many names. I better be careful here. I can't tell you everybody's channel, but these are people that I watch quite often. BeFit Beekeeping, Emily, she
Mhm.
is really good, and she has, or if you go back and watch some of her videos, she has tried everything, and she's tried all the things. And so she's taken a lot of heat for some of the things she's tried, but she's really developing into quite a really good beekeeper. And she's just a pretty cool girl to watch on YouTube.
She in
Beekeep,
Canada? Is she the one in Canada?
she's in Michigan.
In
Um,
Michigan.
Michigan. Now, speaking of Canada, we got the Canadian Beekeepers blog. Ian Stepler up there is just solid, and he's really good to watch. He's real cerebral in what he's doing. And I just can't name everybody. There are some people that are going to watch this. They're going to say, "Why didn't you shout my channel out?" And so I got to be careful. But I try to watch honestly. You know, if like you reached out to me, Jed, and I'll watch a video or two. I like to kind of see what people are just getting started are doing, and with both with the beekeeping and with the YouTube. And I can't watch every video that everybody puts out. It's just impossible. Anyone who gets on YouTube knows that. But I do like to just kind of keep an eye, a feel for what's going on. You know, obviously 628 Dirt Rooster, Randy McCaffrey's great. Yappy B Man is really great. Gosh, I know I've forgotten so many people. So please, if you're a friend of mine and I didn't mention your channel, please forgive me.
Send me the hate. Send all the hate to me
No,
because it's a super unfair.
there's
It's a
none, but
very
there are
unfair
so many,
question.
so many people that I do watch, and I don't know, there's a bunch that I did not list here. So, but those are a few people that I become really close friends with, and just have really enjoyed. You know, Joey Rawls down in Louisiana, Grammy Midwife's, Grammy Midwife here in Ozark, Alabama, not far from here. She's a good friend of mine. She has a channel. I mean, Midwife's Hive, Grammy Midwife's Hives and Homestead. Lisa is hilarious. She's as Southern as they come, and she's great. You've got a young man up here not far from here as well. Grayson with Wildwoods Honeybees, I think, or Honey Farm is the name of his channel. So anyway, I keep naming them on and on, but I don't want to take up the whole time naming YouTubers that I watch, but there's so many good ones. Then you have the greats like, you know, you got folks like David Burns that's got a great following, huge following,
Mhm.
Frederick Dunn, that, and then Mr. Ed down there in Louisiana. And so many great people. David is more of a he's teaching people how to keep bees, and he's grown his thing doing that, and Fred does a lot of that as well. Just great, you know. Fred's awesome. We know Fred is absolutely hilarious if you know him in person. He's one of the funniest guys you'll meet. He has a dry humor that's just great, and I could just go on and on and on.
Well, I appreciate listing those off. I actually think it is beneficial for those listening. When I started beekeeping, people ask me, how did you start? Like, what did you do? I was interested. I went and just pulled the trigger, got way over my skis on this one, got way ahead of myself, and then I watched hundreds of hours of YouTube video that first year. And I'm embarrassed to say it, it might be more than hundreds. Like, and these people that Bruce is mentioning, that's who I watched. Like, that's who I watched, and I watched Bruce a ton. Um,
One thing I would caution people is when you watch YouTube, and there is some truth to this. There are a lot of people that don't have a lot of respect for YouTubers, whether it's beekeeping or whatever else, because I think a lot of people feel like we're just out here trying to get in front of everybody and maybe make some money at it, which there's not much money. I haven't made, I make a little bit, but not a lot with YouTube. But you have to really kind of take everything with a grain of salt. I know you know this, Jed, but beekeeping is very regional and everybody has their own opinion of how to do it. So if you watch me keeping bees in February or March doing splits and you live in Canada, you're probably not going to be able to do tomorrow what I did today, you know, tomorrow what I'm doing. So you just have to realize that this is what I tell folks, and Greg Burns says there are no absolutes in beekeeping, and that is true. You have to realize that there are multiple ways to do things, and that you can't just focus in on one method or one person that's teaching something, and that it has to be done that way. That's the only way it can be done. Don't allow yourself to be locked into tunnel vision and not look at the horizon as you go into this thing. Enter this thing with an open mind and be willing to try different things. Be willing to learn from different things and be willing to learn from different people. If you go on YouTube and you watch three different YouTubers doing the same thing three different ways, for example, splits or catching a swarm, if just try it. If it sounds like the principles will work, try it. If it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that person is a bad beekeeper or doesn't know what they're doing. It just means it's just probably not the best way for you to do it. So you just have to take things with a grain of salt, and just realize that, you know, you could probably glean some things from a lot of beekeepers. In my case, many times you can glean what not to do. But it's because I do make mistakes and I try to own up to it when I do. But I hope when I do that, it helps others learn from that so they don't repeat the same thing. But the best thing to do is kind of like what you did, Jed. You went and you watched a lot of videos, but you also have a local mentor. So yes, I
Mhm.
think YouTube there are bee principles that apply all the time. You always have the bees make wax, they make comb, they lay eggs, there are workers, drones, and queens. You know, there are certain bee principles that don't vary at all. They have to be there in there for the colony to survive. They have to have food, they have to have carbohydrates and protein, they have to have space. They will swarm if they don't. There are certain principles that apply, but that's about it. Almost everything in beekeeping besides the basic bee biology is variable depending on the breed of bees, where you live, you know, how you want to keep bees, the type of box they're in. There's so many different variables, the weather, what's surrounding the area, the environment, what kind of plants are there. So I would say once again, watch all the YouTube videos you want and glean from each person, but it's all local. So you need to have a local person or a local group of people you can talk to and bounce ideas off of that can help you really develop your skills in your particular situation.
Speaking of advice, what is the best piece of advice that someone from the community gave you regarding beekeeping or life?
I really think that the best advice I have was quite possibly, as far as keeping bees, the very first advice that my mentor gave me is you got to take care of the mites and beetles. It's like, you got to take care of the mites and beetles. And I didn't believe it. I kind of went off in the treatment free thing for a while. I tried to do that. And, but I've circled back completely now. And I really do try to watch that. I've really put a lot of effort into taking care of the mites in recent years, and the beetles. I'm still still trying to fight both of those things, but I am aware of them more now. And I really do try to eliminate those and any other pests that you may have. Just really pay attention to your bees and try to take care of the pests, because the pests are vectors for um, basically they're vectors for viruses and disease that come into the hive. As far as life advice, I really think that I'm not sure if I've received a lot of just straight up life advice that has really hit me, but I do know that my being, my who I am has changed in a positive way from just being around these people. And it's, you know, when you surround yourself with people who believe how you believe when it comes to beekeeping, or who are willing to discuss with an open mind beekeeping and other things such as the nature of man and spiritual things. One thing that I think is really cool is that, you know, I have my faith, and, you know, Greg and Brian have their faith. I'm not even sure what church they go to, but that doesn't matter. We all have a common belief in the divine nature of man and of these bees and the insects. We believe that there is a God, and we believe that there is a purpose to what we're doing. And one of the parts of our stream team, one of the things that Greg has established with his farm, Nature's Image Farm, he has a hashtag Be the Lighthouse, BEE the Lighthouse, and that is something that we're all trying to do. And if you can take that attitude of it, if you can take that into everything in life, not just beekeeping, if you want, it can be a light to those around you, to penetrate the darkness, you can help people out. And that's kind of where and I've always kind of felt that way a little bit about not just beekeeping, but I've tried to be that type of a person, let your light so shine, Matthew 5:16. And knowing Greg and being around him and Brian and so many others in this community, it has just skyrocketed that importance in my life. And when we talk about these things on the stream team, some people I think get turned off by it, frankly. A few people do, but a vast majority of people have really appreciated and thanked, us for not being fearful with sharing our beliefs and, our deep testimony of the importance of honestly of God and of the Savior and of the light that it can bring into our lives. And so once again, the bees are the conduit to the people. It becomes much more serious than just beekeeping when you start talking about these things. And I would say that I've become a better person, not so much because of any one piece of advice I received from any other person, but because of the community as a whole. And it's been awesome.
Okay, before we leave the community topic, one more question. How do you see, if at all, the beekeeping community evolving over the next few years?
I think it's going to continue to grow. One thing that Cayman Reynolds has done, that's another YouTube channel I would recommend people watch. He is very fundamentally sound. I don't know why I didn't think of him earlier, but he has developed a community. I actually called him probably about I'm saying 4 to 5 years ago now. I got in touch with him. Uh, I actually got to know Cayman a little bit before he ever started his conference. He helped me, and we talked on the phone a few times. He knew I was on YouTube. My channel was much smaller then, and he was very. That's just an example of the community. But Cayman was very frustrated with I would say the division between commercial beekeepers and hobbyists. That there was not very much communication because obviously commercial beekeepers, their livelihood is to keep bees alive and to be able to make money and make a profit at it. And there was like a division or like in a unwillingness to share with hobbyists or smaller beekeepers, and that frustrated him. And I understand that completely. And we talked about it. I think on more than one occasion. And so he developed his conference, and the conference started off very small. I didn't go to the very first year. I think it was 200 or 300 people, maybe. I don't know exactly, but it was very small up near his home in Tennessee, I believe. And then the next year it moved to Sevierville, Tennessee, 800 people, I believe. And then every year it grew. This past year we had, I think, around 2,800, 3,000 people there, 3,600, I think, with all the vendors. So it's turned into almost like a movement. And I think that he kind of had that vision of let's grow this thing. Let's create an atmosphere where commercial beekeepers and hobby beekeepers can sit down together and share. Let's create an environment where that really spurns entrepreneurship and development of better products. Let's create an environment that really allows people to um, grow this community and get to know each other. And let's bring in creators, YouTubers. Let's bring in the icons of the industry, and let's all get together and let's see what we can do. And that's really where this thing, I think, started. And, that our stream team grew out of that. I could tell the story of how Greg and Brian and I met. That would be for another day probably. But I think the fact that Heyman, being a YouTube person, a creator himself, and inviting other people to come in that people recognized, many times YouTube people are pretty friendly. We're outgoing. We're trying to kind of get to know people, and meeting each other. It created an environment for us to meet each other. And for all the people there who were just attending the conference were able to meet us. And you really do feel like family. So I think that's where it's going. I think the community is going in that direction. But after we started the stream team thing, there were some other chats that kind of started up very soon after that, and they've grown also. And a lot of the same people are involved. We kind of all know each other, and the people in the community, you know, have and the people in the comments have gotten to know each other, and it's grown and grown and grown. And almost every night you can find a beach chat on somewhere, and people just are getting to know each other. And so that's where I think the community is going. I think it's just going to grow. It's become a nationwide and even a worldwide phenomenon. I know there are people all over the world that we see on our chat, people from Canada and people Australia, the UK, all over the place. We see comments and we And so it's kind of a neat thing. But I think as that community grows, everything's going to get better. More ideas are going to be shared, and it's just going to be a more warm environment. Now, there still are those that don't like that very much, and that's okay. And some of the commercial beekeepers that I've met, many of them are very friendly, but some are very private, and that's okay too. And they don't want to get involved in YouTube, and they don't like it necessarily. And they just think that, I think a lot of us out here are kind of maybe, I don't know, trying to encroach or trying to give advice that maybe we don't know what we're doing. And sometimes that's true. And so there is still a little bit of tension out there, and I understand that. It's totally fine. I think that if you're a private person, if what you do for your business is really nobody else's business, and that's perfectly fine. So I respect that, and that's totally fine. But there's also room for people like Bob Benny and Ian Stepler and other people who are commercial guys, California Beekeeper Jose, that share what they're doing, and they share what works and what doesn't work, and it helps all of us who may not be quite as big to be able to be better at what we're doing. And they say a rising tide lifts all ships. That's kind of what I think happens with this community. I think it's just going to get better and better over time.
Bruce, we've seen a lot of concerns recently about the decline in the bee population. What are your thoughts on what's causing this, and how, if at all, is it affecting you?
The numbers are staggering for many commercial beekeepers, and Brian Cooper at Castle Hives put out a video just a couple of days ago where he gave the hobbyist perspective on that. It was a really good video. And he said, what about us? He's had a lot of
Mhm.
loss too. And commercial guys do get most of the publicity, but they are all the biggest beekeepers, and it's, as it impacts them, it's a huge deal. So, I think it's got to have something to do with, obviously, the environment. I don't know if it's the sprays, if it's the, everything working together, the synergistic effects of everything. It could be weather. It could be, sprays that are out there. It could be mites and viruses. Maybe there's some kind of new virus that's coming out, or some kind of a new disease. I really don't know what's happening. As far as my bees go, it's been a little strange. And I actually talked to one of my mentors here, Tyler Walker at Choctaw Bee Company. He's a commercial guy that kind of helps me out here. We kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And then Davis McLaughlin here in town is my other guy that kind of bounce ideas off of. He's the guy I went to almonds with, but haven't talked to Davis about it. But Tyler, I texted him the other day, and he said that, I don't know that he's had any more losses than usual, but he said that it's kind of been strange. And I've noticed the same thing, in that you'll have strong colonies that just, they look weak for no reason, really. They go back and they look weak. Or, in my case, I've had some that they just abscond. It's almost like the old colony collapse disorder. That's what people would describe is the bees would just leave. The colony would have brood and food, and they would just leave. And I think I've seen some of that, although this time either they get robbed out pretty quickly, or they have over the winter. But and we'll be discussing, I know, on the stream team the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to discuss that with, maybe between ourselves and maybe with some guests, some different guests we're going to have on, some of the big ones. Like I think Randy Oliver's coming on in a couple of weeks. So I think we're going to have some really good discussions. And so I don't know, but so far my losses have been about average for me.
It makes logical sense to me that the environment would affect the bees this way. Have you seen something like this before? And or if not, how have you seen the bees, your hives, respond to different components in the environment?
That's really hard to say. I think so much of it is, we have a lot of farms around here. They raise cotton and peanuts. Obviously, when you have big ag or big agriculture, we have some corn around here as well. I think there are a few soybeans in the area and some various things. And so obviously, when you have big crops, row croppers, you're going to have sprays. You're going to probably have some fungicides and even some pesticides that are sprayed. But bees have coexisted with large farms forever and for many, many years. And it's not like they just started spraying crops last year. They've been doing it for a long time. I am not really up on all the different things that they spray. I don't understand how all that works synergistically with the beehives and with nature. Obviously, if it's not natural, then it's not necessarily good for the bees, but it maybe we can have food to eat because of it. You know what I mean? And so it's like a trade-off. I believe that Michael Palmer, I believe, has done some research on his area. I think is he in Vermont or New Hampshire? I think he's in Vermont. And they have actually looked at the pollen in the bees, and they have noticed that there are some, percentages of these different pests or these bit different. I think it's the neonaticides or whatever. I'm not sure what it is. Fungicides. I don't remember. I watched the video and I can't remember what it was, but there was something in the pollen that had him concerned. I don't know if it gets in the wax as well, but I think people are seeing maybe some effects on brood, on queens. Maybe queens don't live as long. It might be related to that. I really don't know all the research. It's such a huge topic, but there's something got to be something going on. And I do think that, for example, up in the Midwest, up in Ohio, where Greg and Brian both live, they had one of maybe the worst drought in history up there this past fall. And so are the bees in Ohio, have they died because of the huge drought, or are they dying because of something else? That's a big question. Is it related to weather? Is it related to sprays? Is it related to a combination? It's just so many variables in beekeeping that it's hard to really to pinpoint it. And so I know that they're probably scrambling right now, doing a lot of research, trying to figure things out. And I think we'll know more as time moves on. But I know they had a very similar experience, I think, back in the 2000s with what they call the colony collapse disorder, CCD. And I'm not sure if they ever came up with a real cause for it. There are all kinds of theories. But over time, it got better. And now it feels like that was before I started keeping beekeeping. I think I came in on the tail end of that when I started keeping bees. We might be about to experience a similar thing, it sounds like, but hopefully we can get on top of it and overcome it and they can figure it out. And I'm more than willing to listen and try and learn, but I honestly don't know. I don't know what the cause is. I don't know if anybody really does right now.
All right, Bruce, let's wrap this up with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this? One word answer, one,
Sure.
2 word answer. Those are the rules. Um, Favorite football team?
BYU.
Go
Go Cougs.
Cougs.
That's right.
Favorite hobby that's not beekeeping?
Sports, just sports, watching football, sports play. I used to play, but now I watch.
Go-to ice cream flavor?
My favorite is peach. Strawberries are very close second. Love strawberry ice cream.
Favorite time of the year for beekeeping?
Coming up on it right now. Spring.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Night owl. Well, definitely, really neither. I hate early mornings though, so I would have to be qualified, categorized as a night owl.
Most used beekeeping tool?
Hive tool.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Favorite place you've ever visited?
Oh wow.
You need to go on more
I
vacations, Bruce.
I don't go on a lot of vacations, but probably this is going to sound really odd and strange, but I really like Utah.
Let's go. One thing that you'd bring to a deserted island.
Food.
If you weren't beekeeping, what would you be doing?
Um, I haven't even thought of that in a long time. Probably try to travel more, maybe.
Hey, great answers. Uh, Bruce, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And of course, follow Bruce at Bruce's Bees. He's got all the advice and he is a legend, not just for the beekeeping community, but for up and coming beekeepers. Thanks so much, Bruce.
Thanks a lot, Joe. It's nice to meet you.